Welcome to my channel. This video is about Betty Broderick. This is the third video in the 3-part that I had made, and this is going to be about the psychological component as well as my opinion. Betty was diagnosed with 2 personality disorders, histrionic personality disorders, HPD for short, and narcissistic personality disorders, NPD for short. A personality disorder is a way of thinking, feeling, and behaving that deviates from social norms. It is generally unhealthy, inflexible thoughts, patterns, and maladaptive behaviors that cause friction with relationships to family, friends, or coworkers. Personality disorders aren't mental illnesses, and personality disorders aren't generally treated with group or individual therapy. Medications do not work, and they do not go away, and if left untreated, the person will only have relationships with many issues. People can live a normal life if their behavior doesn't manifest in an unhealthy way. NPD is the only personality disorder that is very resistant to treatment, and people who have a co-occurrence of NPD and other personality disorders are very difficult to treat. I go into detail about NPD and HPD in another video, as well as borderline personality disorder, BPD, the disorder I thought Betty had. When I had researched the co-occurrence of histrionic and narcissistic personality disorder, I realized the diagnosis seems fair as an armchair psychologist. Make sure to check out all the videos to get a better understanding of the personality disorder. Now, the reason why I thought Betty had BPD is because she made frantic efforts to avoid abandonment from Dan. She had a pattern of unstable and intense relationships with Dan and her children, alternating between devaluing, idealization, or praising them. She was impulsive with her spending habits. She engaged in reckless behavior such as damaging Dan's property, sending explicit emails, and leaving inappropriate voicemails, despite this causing harm to herself. She threatened suicide. She had attempted suicide and made shallow cuts in an effort for attention on another occasion. She had a gross change in appearance when she gained excessive weight and stopped caring for herself like she did before. Now, this is slightly different from BPD in most cases because it wasn't something that happened like on a weekly or monthly basis. This was just a one-time thing, so that may not necessarily apply because usually people do that because they have, or BPD, people with BPD do that because they lack a real true sense of self. So they may change the way that they dress and carry themselves because of the fact that they don't really know who they are. She also had inappropriate, intense, and difficult to control anger with Dan and her children. Again, that's my opinion as a spectator, and I cannot diagnose a person, especially not from afar. And in my NPD video, there's something else that I had discussed that I feel is very important since she was diagnosed with NPD, and that's a whole object relation and object constancy. If you watch the video, then you're aware that Betty saw Dan and Linda as evil, and her view of them cannot and will not change. Without whole object relation and object constancy, people with NPD can only see themselves and others in one of 2 ways. Either they're special, unique, and perfect, or they're defective, worthless, or trash, and she saw them as trash. BPD and NPD rarely overlap, and based on the readings I've done for cluster B personalities, the co-occurrence of HPD and NPD is fitting. I read an article about histrionic narcissist by Preston Nee on Psychology Today, and it made the most sense in regards to Betty. Keep in mind, people with NPD are resistant to change, so even with intense therapy, they tend to remain the same. Histrionics and people with borderline personality disorder can improve, but with NPD, it's just a lot more difficult to treat them. The name of the article is called 7 Signs of an Emotional Histrionic Narcissist, and again, this is by Preston Nee. I will leave the article link below so you can read it in its entirety because I'm going to read portions of the article for brevity's sake. Number 1 is dramatic negative emotion. Histrionic narcissists often have the tendency to exhibit overly dramatic negative emotions when they don't receive the attention, appreciation, or entitlement they believe they deserve. This may range from not getting quick customer service to momentary lack of attentiveness from a spouse to being told no when seeking an exception to the rule, or other instances when their self-imagined privileges are not being catered. They are frequently unreasonable in their demands, inequitable in the way they treat people, insensitive to the difficulties of others, and disproportional in their emotional response. Whether it's intense anger, narcissistic rage, or a manic outburst, histrionic drama, they often perceive a lack of attentiveness and deference as a threat to their self-esteem. They will respond with hostility and even aggression. They overwhelm their victims with intense negative drama and browbeating their victims with the hope of getting what they want. So examples for Betty are being upset with Dan and crashing her car in his house, burning his clothes, breaking items and throwing dishware, yelling at the children for not doing what she wanted, and also dropping them off one by one at Dan's house for minor infractions. Also, let's not forget her threatening to kill Dan and threatening to kill the kids if they don't do as she says. Number 2 is dramatic positive emotions. Examples will be insincere flattery, appeal to vanity and ego, fake friendliness and acceptance, exaggerated closeness and intimacy, promising positive rewards after dishing out negative treatments, etc. Some histrionics may change from negative and positive emotions quickly as well. We see Betty do this in her discussion with her son on the voicemail, where she compliments him heavily when she randomly changes the subjects, and then she goes back to disparaging Dan and Linda. Also, the letters with Brad, she was also so sweet in the letters to him. She was laying it on thick. That honey was super thick. But behind his back, she would say rude things. She didn't match her energy behind his back as she did in front of him. She told people that he's just a friend and, he's gay. He's not someone that she's intimate with. She would never be intimate with him, but it was just different. What she told the world, her friends, her family, was completely different than what she was saying to him behind closed doors. Number 3 is a constant need for attention. The main reason for the overly dramatic behavior, both negative and positive, of the histrionic narcissist is the insatiable desire for attention and approval. However, behind this craving for specialness is often a fragile self-esteem and serious attachment, trust, and security issue. In relationships and in life situations, some histrionic narcissists enact tests to see whether people are willing to take the extra step to serve, placate, or rescue them, thus affirming their brittle self-worth. She always felt the need to seek others for anything. She would speak to anyone about her problem. She called multiple people after she shot Dan. After she was in custody, she reached out to several reporters. She has difficulty staying in the background because of her need for approval, validation, or attention. Number 4, self-absorbed egocentrism and lack of empathy. Since the histrionic narcissist's primary focus in life is approval and self-gratification, other people's thoughts, feelings, and priorities are frequently disregarded with little or no consideration unless they have something to gain from them. Betty showed her lack of empathy with the voice recording with her son. She didn't care that her son was distraught about not being with her, and even though he begged her not to use bad words, she kept doing it. When her friends asked her to not speak about Dan and Linda because it made them uncomfortable, she didn't care. She lacked empathy and couldn't understand their frustration. She displayed this when she commented on how people were upset over Dan and Linda's death. She also, to this day, shows a lack of remorse and has not been released on parole because she still comes across as bitter and angry with Dan. Number 5, boundary violation and manipulation. They violate boundaries and manipulate people for their personal gain. They often target individuals whom they can exploit psychologically, emotionally, physically, sexually, materially, and/or financially. This is apparent with Betty continually going in Dan's home without permission. Like, she's just breaking his boundaries. And despite him telling her several times to leave or not go there or to fine her or to go through the court and try and have her removed from the cops, by the cops, she just kept doing it anyways, continually just violating those boundaries. It is also seen in how she treats Dan. She used Bran for companionship and support, but disparaged him behind his back. This can also be seen as far as emotional manipulation for how she treats her kids. And I saw one incident with her and her daughter. Well, her daughter is the one that discussed it. Actually, another friend, too, discussed it on trial, where Betty had told her daughter to get some shoes. She was like, oh, these are really cute. This will look really nice on you. And then later on, when they were back in the car, made her feel guilty for buying the shoes for her because she's like, oh, I always spend money on you. And she made it seem like she was the one that made her spend the money. Like, oh, you made me spend this money and I don't have money. I can't afford this and blah, blah, blah. When it was her idea, she was the one that was telling her to buy these shoes and urging her on. So this is psychological manipulation. This is also emotional manipulation. Number 6 is maybe unrealistic and unreliable. Some histrionic narcissists are higher functioning and can attain certain levels of personal and or professional success in life, at least for a time. However, both higher and especially lower functioning histrionic narcissists may suffer from a lack of realism, which can make their decision making impractical and impatient, resulting in disappointments and failure. Betty was a very reliable, and she didn't come across as unrealistic most of the time. So I don't think this one necessarily applies to her. 7 is difficulty coping with stress and change. Many histrionic narcissists have great difficulty handling stressors, which threaten their self-centeredness and perceived entitlements. Whether it's personal relationships, workplace environments, or societal issues, histrionic narcissists adjust poorly when reminded that the world does not evolve around them. And most people will not put them on a pedestal. This is a bitter truth for histrionic narcissists, many of whom are unable to let up and unwilling to let go. So histrionic narcissists may experience anxiety, depression, psychosis, or other mental health issues due to their inability to adjust and adapt in an ever-changing world. This is evident in how Betty reacted to the separation to Dan and to problems in her marriage before the separation. She threatened to kill herself and also tried before. She also responded with a narcissist rage and manic outburst. One of the things that was mentioned was how early in their marriage, how she wanted to jump ship because it wasn't the way that she wanted it to be, and also how she tried to commit suicide because, again, their circumstances, the stress and all of that. Now, keep in mind, again, with any of these traits or behaviors or patterns you see, we all may have one or two or a couple more of these traits. It doesn't mean that you necessarily have a personality disorder. Generally, personality disorders are something that is like it's impairing your life and it really impacts you and other people's lives. That's usually when they say, oh, yes, you have a personality disorder. So my opinion is that Betty had untreated histrionic narcissistic personality disorder, and her impulsivity and rage pushed her over the edge. Since she lacks empathy and whole object relation, she will go to her grave believing that killing Linda and Dan was beneficial to society. She's not, that's not going to change. She considered them as evil people worthy of devaluation, and unfortunately, she fails to understand that she jailed herself with her obsession of the pair, and the mental jail that she was in is now her physical jail because of her actions. Her actions is also now memorialized forever in books, series, movies, podcasts, and YouTube videos. The true victims are the children who lost both of their parents and had to navigate the world under a microscope. They were also put between their parents, and as adults, they're still under their parents' lights, unfortunately. I can only hope their quiet existence has brought them some peace because they deserve it, and it's kind of like unfair where it's like your whole life is just completely changed and disrupted because of people that are related to you. It's not even you. It was their parents. The funny thing about this whole situation is her burning Dan's clothes, like running her car into his home, throwing and breaking things aren't uncommon for jilted wives. Like this particular action or actions are something that we've seen on TV or we've read in the papers. Like I remember Lisa Left Eye Lopez accidentally burning down her home because she was burning her like ex-boyfriend's clothes. I think he was cheating. Then also Waiting to Exhale, if you've seen that, where Angela Bassett's character burned the clothes of her ex-husband. Like he left her for, I think it was the secretary. I don't know who she was, but another woman, and she burned his clothes in the front yard. And I actually read an article the other day where this New Jersey woman had burned down the house of a man she was going to have a booty call with. Like, he fell asleep, did not respond to her, and she tried to burn down the house. He was able to escape, him and the dog, before the whole house burned down, which is kind of just ridiculous, but this really did happen. So it's just like, there's so many different things in just fiction or nonfiction that you see these women reacting in these kind of ways. And we've also seen the men who marry, divorce, and remarry much younger women. So that's not something that's new. And sometimes he's mildly successful and sometimes he's greatly successful at the time of the remarriage. That varies. It's not always the same. But it's not often that second marriages succeed. Actually, second marriages have a greater rate of failure. I read that somewhere and I can't remember where. They have a second rate of failure because oftentimes people don't learn from their mistakes. If they don't have any type of real, I don't want to say they have to have therapy, but if they don't have like some good therapy and they don't reflect on what went wrong, what they did wrong, they oftentimes tend to repeat their same behavior. They may pick the same type of person and they put themselves in the same type of role and they react in the same kind of way and they get the same results. So second marriages have actually a higher rate of failure compared to first marriages. The best thing to do is kind of like to get some therapy or at least seek some self-help books and try to get better and improve. But the reason why I'm saying this is because it's very possible if Betty took the time to kind of just chill and just have her own life and let things go with Dan and Linda, she may have seen them get married and get divorced. And she may have seen their demise too, you know? She could have seen this, especially if it wasn't true love. Let's say he wasn't really in love with her and she was just an out. Like, she was someone that can keep him company and he thought she was, beautiful and looked nice. So let's say that was the case. He only cared about the looks and great sex. Eventually he'll get bored and he'll seek a replacement. And if he has already done this, what's going to stop him from doing it again? He's already comfortable with this. He can't say, his Catholic upbringing. It seems that for the longest he was in the marriage with Betty because of the fact that he didn't want to divorce due to his Catholic upbringing, but he was committing adultery. So it's like you already broke the covenants of your oath already. So it really didn't matter if you divorced or not. But let's just go with what he was saying. Well, you've already done that. You've already cheated. You've already divorced. So what's going to stop you from doing it again? And the answer is nothing. You're going to be more comfortable doing it the second time, the third time, the fourth time, or however many times. So who knows? He may have done that again. And we're just speculating that, okay, he's just with her for superficial reasons. Okay. Now, Betty and Dan's relationship, it seems, was based on what some family members were saying, tumultuous from the beginning. So again, it's very possible that because he had a better relationship with Linda was a nicer person, more fun, more outgoing, extroverted person, that it could have lasted much longer and it was a better pick for him. That's also very possible, but we really don't know. We were never given the opportunity to see their lives, flourish or not flourish before our eyes because she killed him. But another thing that I also thought about too was both he and Betty were raised in a two-parent home, so I'm sure there was some sort of standard or pressure at least to not divorce, to stay as a two-parent couple. There's also a slight possibility that he stayed because it was probably in his mind cheaper to keep her, because we do have that going on too, where someone's like, oh, it's cheaper to keep her, blah blah blah. That's also another possibility, but he probably felt like he just couldn't do it anymore because Betty was becoming angry and angrier and she was just doing more because of the fact that she wanted to control him. She wanted to control his behavior, which was to stop the affair, which he should have stopped and he shouldn't have started to begin with because he was married. But we can go on and on about that. That's not really the topic here. Betty had a very sweet boyfriend, Brad, was, he seemed very chill and laid back. Like when you see him on the stand, he's kind of quiet. So it's very possible she could have been truly happy with Brad, but she never really gave him a chance. And she's also very intelligent. She was educated. She had many talents. She had a lot of energy, very organized, of course, and dependable. So she could have had a very successful career on her own, and she didn't even give herself the opportunity to really flourish out there. She could have done so much more. So it was really an unfortunate situation with very complex characters, as we all are. We're all complex, and so their complex is nothing new. And Linda, unfortunately, was thrown under the bus a few times. She wasn't innocent, but I do feel that she was thrown into a war as well. Like, some people are going to have different opinions about this because she was the mistress, and people really frown mistresses. They really look down on the mistress, and it's sad because the mistress isn't the one with the vow to the wife. The husband is. So if you're going to look down on the mistress, you should look down on the man that cheated even worse, because he's the one with the vow. He's the one that made his oath to his wife, not the mistress, but I digress. So she cheated with a man for several years, and she knew he was married. So she knew she was wrong. But at the same time, she was in a precarious situation. You know, we have to remember this was the 80s. Women had opportunities, but not like they do now. It was still somewhat new for women to be in the office. And even when I worked in the early 2000s, there were still issues with sexual harassment and nothing being done. So it's like, if I was dealing with this in early 2000, where it's like, okay, you could have a guy that's blatantly just doing these things, and you go up to the higher ups and they're like, well, nothing's going to be done, get over it. And, you know, I can't imagine what it was like in the 80s, because I was just like, okay, I didn't know work was like this. So it's gotten so much better. I don't see that stuff now. And they also have those like sexual harassment type, for some jobs, not all of them, they'll have the sexual harassment, like, what they call them, those little trainings you go through. There's so many trainings, but that'll be one of them. So they have that. They never used to have that, at least in the past when I went to work, early 2000. Times have changed, but this is the 80s. So it was different. And let's pretend she wasn't interested. Let's just pretend he wasn't this handsome guy and she wasn't interested. How much room does she really have to rebuff him? Because in her situation, you know, she's getting a better job and she doesn't have any experience. She doesn't have any qualifications for this job whatsoever. So it's like a great opportunity. Why not take it? Most people are going to. So if she's in that situation and he's like, oh, I'm interested, I want to take you out for dinner, she can say no. She can quit. She can move on. But it's just like, will she be able to get a job as good as that one? Probably not. And some women will feign interest for that move up, and some of them will gain that experience and then eventually get a new job. So that is an opportunity. But it seems that Dan was very persistent as far as, at least when he was with Betty. So it's very possible he did the same with Linda. And I'm not going to say that she just fell. Oh, like, I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt and say he was the same, where he pursued her and she probably said maybe not in the beginning because he was married, and eventually was like, oh, but I really like him. He's handsome. He's hot. He's, you know, this big boss. You know, he has that. He has power, whatever. And she just went for it. That's what I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt with that. We really don't know because they don't really discuss Linda that much. It's like she's kind of forgotten because it's the war between Dan and Betty. And then Linda's kind of like, oh, she's there. And, oh, yeah, Linda and Dan. But that's as much as you really know about her. It's really based on the fact that she was associated through Dan, and that's it. She was never really her own person, so you really didn't know what truly happened. And depending on the movie you see or the documentary, she may come across as this like really evil person that's taking your man, or someone that's kind of like just in the background somewhere, which is sad because every situation is kind of unique in their own way. Either way, I felt like she was a sacrifice in the war between Dan and Betty, and I blame Dan more than anybody else. I blame him as much as Betty for their death, because he chose to do this the way that he did. He chose to have the affair, gaslight Betty, and then leave in a way that made Betty seem like, oh, he planned this because he wanted us out of this house so he can be in this house and we could be separated or whatever. I think if he left on his own recognizance and he made it very clear, I'm not happy, I don't like when you say this or that to me, and I just feel just demoralized, or I feel degraded, or I'm not happy in this, and he did not cheat, he did this the clean way, they would both still be alive. Like, Betty may have still acted a fool, but I don't think she would have felt as betrayed. And I do believe that Betty needed emotional validation from Dan, and she wasn't getting it, and she wasn't going to get it. She needed him to say, I am sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I did all this. You know, you sacrificed yourself, your body, your time with me, and we've been through a lot, and we went from nothing to something, and here I'm dropping you, and you probably feel like I am abandoning you and I'm a terrible person and I feel terrible for doing this. He needed to like really just have that heart-to-heart conversation and just really take responsibility for cheating. Like, he was wrong, but he didn't do that. And what happened is she just kept acting or reacting badly. And of course, Dan just reacted to her reaction. And so it was just a snowball of them two just not being vulnerable, not being weak with each other, and just going after each other because there's this power play. They're literally doing a tug of war for power. Her power was the being uncontrollable, having the outbursts, calling, yelling, screaming, acting a fool because she can. And his power was finances. And they were using their power. And of course, his ability to be able to do contempt or take her to court or whatever. And he was using her power to get her to submit. And she was using her power to get him to submit. And eventually, what ended up happening was he was like, I'm done. I'm over it. I don't want to deal with this anymore. Here, you have the kids. And she was like, yeah, no, you're not done until I say you were done. And she went and shot him. So either way, it was a power play, and they were just sitting there fighting for power, and she was going to get it no matter what. And in the end, she ended up hurting herself trying to get this power that, to me, I felt isn't worth it, but who knows, for her it may be. Or maybe eventually in time she'll realize that it wasn't worth it. Like I mentioned before, people with MPD lack whole object relation and object constancy. So once she saw him as well as Linda as evil, the fire broke out and it was an eternal flame that it'll last even after Betty is gone. She will never see them as anything else. Now, some witnesses mentioned that she was materialistic and only cared about money. I believe that lacks context. She cared about looking nice and living comfortably, but the issue was the principle of the matter and not the money and what it can buy. She loved Dan, but it wasn't love at first sight. She married him knowing he had potential and sacrificed her time, money, and body to him in hopes to reap the rewards of his success. So this was more so kind of like she wants attention. She needs validation from other people because she doesn't feel like she is someone or something without this. So she uses money in order to get this validation to make herself feel better. And it's not necessarily the money per se. It's really just the people and what they give her, the attention that she needs. And with narcissists too, they will marry someone in order to gain whatever it is that they feel they can gain. And in this case, it was financial stability. So she married him for this. She felt her sacrifices were considered insignificant, and when people told her to get over it, she felt worse because she needed emotional validation from Dan and from others, but I think she needed it the most from Dan. As I mentioned before, she really needed him to be open-hearted and say, I am wrong, I lied, I treated you like crap, and you deserve better. I really felt like she needed it. And even though she was like difficult at times, I mean, she did a lot of crazy stuff, and she was hard to live with because she didn't act. She was explosive. She was very angry. She did need to feel that she was significant and had value because she sought validation as Betty Broderick, not Betty Biscaglia. And he wasn't going to say that, oh, yeah, I'm sorry and you matter, because he didn't want to admit defeat himself, on top of the fact that she was difficult. He instead rather used his power to try and get her to submit, and it wasn't going to work, and it didn't work. They both lacked effective communication skills, and despite minimal evidence, I still believe Dan may either have NPD or narcissistic traits. It takes a special person to gaslight someone for years. Not a day, not a couple weeks, but years. He also failed to see any of the situation through Betty's eyes. He lacked empathy, and if he had any, he would feel guilty. He would feel some form of guilt. If my assertions are correct, then it definitely explains their dynamics. They both sought validation but couldn't give it to each other. She sought control and had resentment towards Dan, and Dan held the power over finances, and she had power over her emotional outburst and pretty much causing discomfort. They continually fought over power and control in their relationship and refused to be weak and vulnerable. They lacked true intimacy, and relationships like that, where two NPD people are together, generally are very shallow. So people NPD tend to attract each other. They do end up in relationships with each other. It is a normal pairing, so it's not like something that is just off here. But in the end, like I said in the beginning, I cannot diagnose anyone. So take my belief as just that, speculation and not facts. However, the Dirty John series should be taken with a grain of salt as well, because it is mostly based on Betty's perception, and she's the unreliable narrator. And while I believe she should be held responsible for killing a sleeping couple at 5:30 in the morning, I also believe she's not a threat to society because two people she wanted to kill are already dead. So it doesn't make sense to keep her in jail and wasting taxpayers' money because she lacks remorse. When her diagnosis clearly states she won't have any remorse, she lacks empathy, it's like jailing a dog for barking. So it doesn't make any sense. And we may not like this, but it's just who she is. So that's not a valid reason to keep her in there, especially knowing her diagnosis. I feel that there's a lot of people in jail that probably need to come out. We need to work on a rehabilitation program, as well as work on getting people really true help that can actually help them long term, because some people aren't able to really function outside of the prison because they need help and they need community help. But who knows? That may be another video. I don't know if I'll ever make it. Thank you so much for sticking in this long. I greatly appreciate it. Go ahead, leave some comments down below. Comment, subscribe if you really like this video, and have a wonderful day.